Hey everybody, Coach Toolshed here, and in today's video I'm going to be bringing you my review for Cyberpunk 2077. And as with all reviews here on Coach Toolshed Gaming, you can rest assured that I took the time to fully beat the game before posting this review. In the case of Cyberpunk 2077, I actually took the time to beat the game a couple of different times. I've actually finished 4 of the endings of the game. I have gotten trophies for 3 of those, so if you want to go back and check up to see that I'm telling the truth, my public profile is wide open, so you can go and take a look at that if you think I am lying, because some of you, I'm sure, are going to think I'm lying as I move through this review, because I'm going to be saying some things in this review that people aren't going to want to hear, some things that people aren't going to want to believe, some things that even a month ago, if I had said them, people would have laughed me out of the room. However, what I'm about to tell you in this review is not just my opinion in some cases, but just absolute fact. And people are not going to want to hear some of the things I have to say. Starting out with this. If you are someone who is going to pick up Cyberpunk 2077, expecting this to be a deep RPG experience with lots of decisions that actually affect the game, that affect the story, that will affect how your character ends up at the end of the game, that the decisions you make, that the starting character you choose, that the decisions you make in dialogue along the way, that those actually matter or carry weight in this game, they do not. Literally, no dialogue decisions you make throughout the first 2 acts of this game matter in any way, shape, or form to how the game will end up for you. There is one single mission at the start of Act 3 that everything hinges on, and that will factor in to which ending you get. There are several options in dialogue during this mission. Only one of them matters. This single choice is literally the only decision that matters the entire game when it comes to dialogue. And people are going to try to argue that, but I've beaten the game multiple times. I've gone back and reloaded areas. I've replayed missions, in some cases gone back hours and hours and hours, and replayed entire sections of the game, trying to change the outcome, trying to see if there were other paths to take, if there were other main missions that would open up based on my decisions. This does not happen. Only the very end of the game, which only for no matter which path you take, it will only be a few hours. It's basically in a couple of epilogue missions. Only the one decision matters. You can get multiple endings, quote unquote, and unlock multiple trophies in some cases by making the exact same decisions the entire time up until the very last moment. And none of your dialogue decisions will really matter. At the end, you will be given a binary choice to walk in one direction or to walk in another direction. And your dialogue choices up to that point won't have mattered. You could choose to do one thing, but if you physically go up and move your character to the other side, it will override even the dialogue in that moment. This game is not a deep, choice-driven RPG. It is an action game. And that is just how it is. And if you want to argue that, I would suggest that probably you haven't finished the game, and if you have finished it, you probably haven't delved into going back and trying to change the outcome. Because 95% of the decisions you make in this game will only change what comes out of your character's mouth at that moment. There are a few spots where you can choose if a character survives or not. It's very, very limited. Decisions you were presented early on throughout the first couple acts of the game will seem, at the moment, as if they will carry weight. They do not. They will seem like you have really critical impact moments. I've had friends playing the game like, oh, what do you think I should do in this decision? And at the time too, when I played through, I'm like, oh, I don't really know. What should I choose in this spot? Let me assure you, none of it matters. As disappointing as that may be, as much as that might crush some of you to hear, it is true. And I know people won't want to believe that, but that's how I have to start the review. Because this game has been built up for years and hyped up by CD Projekt Red, and if you go back and read the 10 of 10 reviews that came out of this game 2 weeks ago, that came out a few days before this game launched, glowing with praise about the choices in this game and how drastically you could change the outcome, it's all a lie. Period. If you want to argue with that, I would be happy to argue with you that point. But the fact is, there are games that no one considers to be deep RPGs that have more consequence in their decisions. I'm talking about a game like Assassin's Creed Valhalla that just came out. No one's sitting here praising the deep RPG mechanics for that game, yet there's a lot more consequence in the decisions you make in that game throughout the campaign that will come back and affect the storyline later, and characters will react differently to you based on decisions you make in that game. The choices you make, the people you decide to side with, that you ally with in the game, it will affect the storyline. That doesn't happen in this game. You can screw over any gang in this world, and nothing will happen to you down the line. Literally nothing. In fact, one of the endings, one of the corporations that you're fighting against the entire time, one of the endings is they help you anyway. Doesn't matter. You can go in and do side quests where you take out an entire group of enemies in their own club or their own hideout, and you can go to the next spot where they're located and they won't react to you at all. There's no factions to side with. There's no gang wars going on. You don't see anything out in the world that would indicate, other than random events, that there's any sort of activity going on with the gangs at all. It's all focused strictly on the missions. And if you compare this game, and I know a lot of people, here's another thing, a lot of people wanted to deny the similarities between this game and Grand Theft Auto. And they want to say, how can you compare? They're two totally different games. No, they're not. The minute-to-minute gameplay, what you're doing in this game, driving around the city, the way the missions are structured, the way the NPCs give you the missions. You drive to a location, you have some dialogue, they give you the mission, you go out and do it. The minute-to-minute gameplay is not drastically different than Grand Theft Auto. I'm sorry, it's not. The only difference is that the people giving you the quests have a superficial dialogue system in place of a rendered cutscene. Because you still have to go to a spot, sit down. They basically put you into a first-person cutscene where you can't move until the dialogue is over. And the choices you make, again, in the dialogue, they don't matter. They will keep funneling you down the same path. In some cases, you can refuse to do a mission, and they'll be like, yeah, right, we have to do it, V. And you're forced to do it anyway. It doesn't matter. You are totally funneled. People made fun of this. People mocked Fallout 4 for the lack of choice and how everything was superficial. And you could tell Preston Garvey, I don't want to work with you. And he'll be like, yeah, right. See you back in Sanctuary. This game does the exact same thing. Even to a worse degree in some spots. Because at least Preston Garvey would give you a little mouth back it and give you some lip and say, wait a minute now. You got to work with us. He'd give you some sass. In this game, a lot of the times the NPCs don't even change what they say back to you. And when they do, again, it's one sentence dialogue and then they're right back on track. And I have tested this, I have reloaded, I have tried this all out. Try it yourself if you think I'm making this up. This game is not fundamentally different to a Grand Theft Auto game, except it's missing so many of the features that those games would have. And in its place, it has a really weak loot system where you're going to be picking up literal trash the entire game. You're going to be picking up, there's hundreds and hundreds of different items that you can pick up in this game. And when you go in the menu and look, none of them are necessary. It's all like little stat boosts here, like get 5% stamina regen if I drink this for the next 2 minutes. Like, who cares? But it's everywhere. And so much of it is unnecessary. And it's tied into a gear system that it's one of the weakest geared systems I've seen in years. Maybe the entire generation, to be honest. It's just pick up whatever clothes you got, what has the highest armor ranking. Some of the stuff will have an extra stat boost on it. A few of the items. But it's so uninspired. It's so ridiculous. There's no gear sets. You don't get armor bonuses for anything like that. There's no special weapon bonuses. You get the iconic weapons, and if you break them down, you can craft them again, except the game doesn't actually give you enough crafting material to do it in any meaningful way. You can't craft the best stuff, because even if you break down every weapon you get, they don't give you enough crafting material. Because another problem with this game is that the economy and the weapon balancing and just everything about the economy of this game, through the crafting and the money and the way skills work and everything else is just so fundamentally broken. You can make OP builds where you can one-shot enemies, and you can do this right at the start of the game. You just need a little bit of money, and you can make a build that will knock out any single human enemy in the game in one shot. The skill trees, it looks impressive at first. Oh, look at all these skill trees to go down. Yet it is the same hollow type of skill tree experience that you saw in The Witcher 3. You're not really locked out of anything by picking which skills. It's all like incremental stuff. Like, ooh, I can increase my handgun damage by 3%. Wow, riveting stuff. Ooh, and in the next tier I can increase it by up to 5%. Holy cow. That's the sort of upgrades you get. Ooh, I can increase my rifle damage by 5% when hiding behind cover. I mean, it's all just sheer nonsense. You can have the same build as me, or a completely different build, and it's not necessarily going to change how our game plays out. Everyone can still use melee weapons. Everyone still has, at the very least, a rudimentary form of hacking. I didn't put any points into my hacking skills whatsoever, and I could still hack through most of the enemies in the game and at least put some sort of status effect on them. You can hack items to distract enemies. Granted, you can improve that skill, but it's not like there's not any real builds that are going to be unique. You can just put more points into attributes than I have in that attribute, and I'll have points in different stuff. But nothing really feels different. You're not locked out of anything. And so the skill trees just end up being just another uninspired skill tree. If I am getting skill points to put into a skill tree, I should be excited, like, oh, what do I got? What do I got? Not sitting there like, ugh. Do I need to aim down sights on my rifle 50% faster when I already have it at 25%, and that's plenty fast enough to aim down sights in this game? Like, is that, like, am I really jazzed up for that? No. But I buy it because I got all these skill points, so I gotta buy something. Most of it is just, it's just bad. It's just so it's not fleshed out. It's not interesting. And so much of the game you could describe it as. The map is just one gigantic Ubisoft-style icon vomit type of map where you just open it up and you're like, what do you want me to do? I got 100 things I could do over here, 100 things I can do over there, and I know that none of them are really going to be interesting. During the video here, you can see I'm going around in some spots and doing some of these side objectives, the NCPD quests that are littered all over the map. Got to be well over 100 of them that they want you to do. And it's really one of the only ways you can effectively make money in the game. Yet every single one of them is go to a spot, take out 4 enemies, grab an item, you're done. They don't even take 30 seconds to do. It takes longer to travel to the objective than it does to complete it. And I'm sorry, that's terrible game design. If navigating my way around the map is going to take 5 times longer than actually completing the objective when I get there, then your objective sucks. You've designed a poor objective, an uninteresting objective. The world bosses in this game, the cyber psychos as they're called, which take the place of what would have been the monster hunts in The Witcher 3. Well, the monster hunts were multi-step processes, and they always ended in some sort of big fight that was challenging at best. They were some of them were really good, really well designed monster hunts. Some of them got a bit repetitive. They reused some of them a few times. But in this game, these cyber psychos, like I said, there's a build you can get where you can take them out before they even know that you're there. And they're just, boom, neutralized, done. Mission over. No challenge whatsoever. And for the sake of argument, I was playing this on the default difficulty. I know you could turn up the difficulty, but this build, it wouldn't matter. Because the build that you can put together just shoots a tranquilizer dart at the enemies, and it one-shot kills them. Now, you don't have to do that. You could take them out with your normal weaponry, but even that is not a challenge. Again, none of these objectives take more than 30 seconds to a minute, and they're all over the map. And you don't make a lot of money outside of doing them, because the main story missions and the side games don't pay out enough money. And the cost of the item, the cost of the vehicles in the game, and the cost of a lot of the cybernetic upgrades that they want you to equip, they cost so much money that you can play through the entire game and you're still like, I guess I can buy that one. Oh, I think I can afford that car over there, and I'm out of money. Unless you go around and start doing these pointless filler side objectives that are no better than anything you would find that we would criticize in a Ubisoft game for just being nonsense filler content. This game is chock full of it. The most impressive thing I can say about the game is the city itself looks good, and it looks like it could have been interesting. It could have been. It really could have been. But the more you play, the more you realize it's just an empty shell where there's missions that they give you on. It's not a living, breathing type of world, especially if you're playing the game on consoles. Where, as you can see, when I'm driving around, there's very few cars on the road. There's very few people going around. And the NPC reactions. Let's talk about the broken AI, the broken NPCs in this game that don't react to you at all like you would expect in a game like this. I mentioned in my previous video, you go back 20 years to consoles that are 20 years old, the PS2 and the OG Xbox. And Rockstar had full fleshed out NPC systems. You had police chases. The police system with the escalating star system, and they would chase you all over the town, chase you for all over the place, and escalate the pursuit as they went. This game doesn't have that. You'd be able to, if there was an injured person, you would see an ambulance show up to help the injured person. If there was a fire, if a car on fire, the fire department would show up to put out the fire. If you stole a car off an NPC, sometimes they would run away screaming. Sometimes they would cower on the ground. Sometimes they would pull you back out of the car and fight back. Sometimes they would open fire with a weapon. Again, this was 20 years ago. In this game, what do they do in Cyberpunk? Every single NPC you pull out of the car will have the exact same reaction. They will instantly, right outside the door, crouch and sit there, and they will not move. That's how they all react. And that is how the NPCs react to everything in the game. If you are in a building taking out enemies, when you come out, you will see an entire street of people just crouched in place, not moving, not reacting. It is so transparently shallow and hollow out in the world based on the fact that the NPCs are entirely useless. The programming is ridiculous. Even in the combat, after the hot fix, supposedly they fixed the NPCs. They still, a lot of times, will just stand there, waiting for you to come at them. Especially if there's only a few of them left. You can just literally walk right up to them. You don't got to worry about anything. You never have to worry about health. There's health everywhere. It's just... The combat's not a challenge. It feels wonky. The vehicle controls are terrible. Literally the worst... Not the worst. Borderlands is worse. It's the second worst vehicle mechanics I've ever seen in an open world game. All of the other ones are better, aside, like I said, from Borderlands. Borderlands truly has terrible vehicle mechanics. But this game, the vehicles feel like they have no weight to them. They spin all over the road. The minimap is zoomed in so much that you can't see what is in front of you until the turn is already past you. You got to turn around all the time. It's just useless. One of the points I did make in a previous video, I was wrong about one thing. There actually is a north-south marker. It's just not located directly on the minimap. If you look into the top corner of the minimap, there is a small circle up to the side that rotates. That is actually your north-south marker. It's just, it took me a few dozen hours to actually realize, oh, it is. It's right there. It's just almost impossible to see because it's poorly designed, like so much of this game. Also, let's talk about how the city is laid out and where you're actually spending most of your time. Because when you first open up the map and you look at it, you're like, wow, there's a lot of different districts here. And you don't understand at the start of the game that you're going to be spending 90% of your time in one district, Watson, the starting spot. That's where almost everything in the game happens. You do like one major mission out in Pacifica. You do some work out in the Badlands at times. But the other districts, for the most part, you almost never go into for anything. Unless you're just driving around the city, like looking around. If you go, I was looking to clean up some trophies after I beat the game, and I was looking, I'm like, complete all the side gigs and NCPD missions in Santo Domingo or in Westbrook. And I'm like, Westbrook? Like, I barely even recognize that name being mentioned in the game, let alone me having to go there constantly. And Santo Domingo, well, that's in the game? Really? I had to go and look. I'm like, oh yeah, there it is. You never go there. You might drive through it a couple of times on your way to somewhere else, but there's nothing going on there. So I have to ask, exactly how much did they plan on putting into this game, and how much ended up not being there at all? I have to imagine that at the start of the year, it seems like they just started scrambling and said, hey, we have to try to get what we got on the table, and that's it. Because it seems painfully obvious that they did not finish so many things that they wanted to put in this game. I have to believe that. They just didn't have the time to finish this. And I know this sounds ridiculous with all the time that they did have in development, but legitimately, I think to suggest that they need another few months to fix it up, no. This goes well beyond the bugs, well beyond the crashes, well beyond anything else. The game itself does not feel finished by any stretch. It's certainly not the next level, next generation, huge step forward game that people thought it was going to be, and that Cyberpunk and CD Projekt Red, what they were hyping it up to be. It's certainly not that. The phrase jack of all trades comes to mind, but I don't even think that this game reaches jack status in some of these categories. So, like, vehicle controls is horrendous. The combat, until you put a really sufficient amount of points into upgrading some of the combat mechanics, the combat feels pretty janky. Aiming down sights doesn't feel all that great. You do get used to it over time, but if you go back and compare it to any other first-person shooter of the last few years, it's not going to feel good. Just because you can get used to the vehicles, and just because you can get used to the way the guns handle, that doesn't make them good controls. Sure, after you spend 40, 50, 60 hours with the game, yeah, you should have a bit more of a handle on how the game controls and have improved at it. But that doesn't mean that they're well-designed mechanics. Because in this game, like I said, go play something else and come back to me and then pop back to this game, and you'll see. It doesn't feel good to play. It takes a long time to get used to the jank. And the fact that none of the systems are fleshed out, again, every time I think of the loot and gear system in this game, it is a disaster. It's even a huge step backwards from The Witcher 3. The Witcher 3 at least had gear sets that you could go out and collect, and you could upgrade and craft. This game doesn't have stuff like that. There's really no upgrade system. You can break weapons down, and if you have an iconic weapon that you break down, you get a blueprint, and then you can try to craft it. But like I said, the crafting materials in this game are so scant, they're hard to find. Even if you break everything down, which I was doing, it's so imbalanced. It's so obvious that it's not finished. And what are you going to say? Oh, well, they're going to spend the next 3 years patching in content? Great. Well, the problem is, it's never going to be what they said it was, even if the game was fixed. Because it's not a choice-driven game. It's really not. And that, I think, is the crux of what most people were really looking for. And that's what was being hyped up and promised. If I had to compare this game to other games, I would say it's a slice of GTA without as many features and without as well of a defined world. I would say it takes elements of the Division crafting and gear system and dumbs it down to the point where if you put a Division player in front of this, they would look at you like you had 3 heads, because it's just that bad. But that's the type of loot system it is. The way you go through the game and the different objectives, it's kind of like Deus Ex, but again, a Deus Ex player would look at you, and if you put this game in front of them and say, this level design is pretty bad. And the different skills I have really don't matter, because if I can't get through the front door by hacking, I can literally just walk around to the side of the building and jump over a fence. It's like, the level design is amateurish at best. If I had to compare the map to anything, it's a Ubisoft game. There's a bunch of pointless filler cluttering the map, and like that's how the game actually is. Now, there are good storylines. A few. Some of them are duds. There are some good characters. I like Judy. I like Panam. I like Takamura. Some of the characters I really didn't care about at all, like Rivers, really didn't care. Carrie, really didn't care. Some of the other side characters, I won't remember who they are in another couple months, because they're just kind of there. I guess Victor was a pretty good character. But aside from that, that's really all the game has to offer. It has some good main story set pieces. The first time you go through, there's some interesting stuff. And if you were to just play through this game one time, knowing what it is, knowing that it's an adventure game and an action game more than anything else, and you go in knowing that and expecting that, and you don't worry about the choices you make because they don't matter, and you just go in and you just want to enjoy it for what it is, it's not even that bad of a game. It's pretty good in some ways. Kind of. But it's not there. It's not finished. It should be way better than it is. And I'm not even someone who had a lot of expectations for the game. But I'm not going to sit here, too, and tell you that I'm overly disappointed and try to knock it as if it's the worst thing I've ever played. Because it's not that either. It's not a terrible game. It's just not great. It tries to be too many things, and it fails. There's not a single spot in this game that I can point to and say, wow, it really stands out in this regard. Aside from, like I said, the world looks like it should be dripping with atmosphere and it should be really cool. It's not really, as far as I'm concerned. It feels so empty and hollow. There's too much missing that I can't forgive. One of the things that I keep hearing people say as they try to defend the game is that people had their expectations set too high. They had unrealistic expectations for the game, and that's why they're judging it so harshly, and they're really giving it a bad rap. Well, as I've said, I didn't really have high expectations for this game to begin with. I'm not someone who is bitterly disappointed in the game. It's a little bit worse than I expected it to be, but I didn't expect this to blow my mind or shatter the earth in any way, shape, or form. But the fact is that I see people saying that it's an expectation issue. And let me take an analogy here that has nothing to do with gaming, because I like to do that. Take some of the tribalism out of, I like the game, I don't like the game, rah! And just let's look at a real world example about how expectations work between a customer and a business. If I walk into a restaurant and sit down to eat, and the waitress says to me, hey, with the purchase of these entrees over here, you will get a free appetizer and free dessert, and we will give you a voucher for one free cocktail. And I say to myself, wow, that's a pretty good deal. I say to my friend, hey, we should get these entrees because it comes with all this other stuff. We're going to get free appetizers, free drinks. Why won't we do that? Obviously. And then we put on our order. The waitress comes back with just our entrees. And then we eat our entrees, and she slips us the bill, and we say, wait a minute, what happened to all the other stuff you promised us? And she said, oh, well, I mean, why would you expect that? I mean, you paid for a meal, and you got the meal. I mean, why would you expect all this other stuff? You want free appetizers and free dessert and free drinks? Why would you expect that? And I say, well, because when I came in, you told me that was going to be part of my purchase. Well, in this case, the waitress would be in the wrong. She set your expectations wrong. Now, if I walked into the same restaurant, and the waitress said, hey, what would you like to order? And me and my friend ordered our entrees, and then the food came, and I started demanding of the waitress. I said, wait a minute, I expect free drinks, and I expect free appetizers. How come I'm not getting it? When she never offered it, well, then that would be unreasonable of me. That would be expectations that I set falsely upon myself. But you see, when it's the business or the person selling the product that is the one setting the expectations, you can't then blame the customer for having those expectations. And to suggest that it's the people's fault for having their expectations set too high, no. Not in this case. CD Projekt Red has been hyping this game to the moons and stars for the last 8 years. They have been telling us that this game will not have any compromise, that they will not cut any corners, that the game will not launch until it's ready, that we will have choices and decisions to make in this game like we've never seen before. People said, are you making a Cyberpunk version of GTA? Absolutely not. This game will be completely different than that. Blah, blah, blah. And the fanboys went along with it. And the hype train rolled. And I would say this is the biggest hype train we've ever seen for any game that was a new IP. Ever. I can't think of any game that was a brand new IP that has had this level of hype behind it. where even casual people who don't even buy even 1 or 2 games a year know about this game and have been talking about this game. And now the high profile failures of the launch with the bugs and the crashes, which I didn't even really get into in this review. I have a whole other video about that if you'd like to go back and look, and where I describe my personal issues that I've been having with the game. I've had over 24 hard crashes at this point. Numerous reloads due to bugs. I mean, this game was crippled with bugs for me. And if you're someone who's played the game and you didn't have bugs, more power to you. But that doesn't mean that it isn't incredibly broken for so many other people. And the fact that Sony had to pull the game off the store, and I'm not going to be under the delusion that they did it for benevolence sake or that they did it to be the good guys. Obviously, there's money. Their money considerations are what matters. Sony, who makes a 30% revenue cut of the game, doesn't want to be responsible for refunding 100% of the game back to customers when there must have been an overwhelming amount of refund requests. And CD Projekt Red tried to push that back into Sony and Microsoft, and we all know that Sony is stingy with their return process anyway, especially digitally. So obviously, they pulled the game off the store. And I think that was the right decision. I don't think they made it for the benefit of gamers, quote unquote. That's public relations talk. But regardless, the right decision was made by Sony, I feel, because this game was not ready to launch. And unfortunately, even if they fixed the bugs, there so much more would need to be fixed and added to this game to make it a truly special experience, because I can't point to anything that this game excels at. Does it have some good characters? Yeah, but we've seen better characters in other games. Like I know people love some of the characters. I like some of the characters a lot too. But it's not the greatest story that we've ever seen. It's not the greatest characters we've ever seen. It's certainly not the most interwoven and complicated and intricate storyline that we've ever seen. It's not that. In fact, I would say 3 out of the 4 endings I got were actually pretty stupid. One of them was I was sitting there like, I can't believe somebody wrote this and thought that this would be a good ending to a game. It was not fun or interesting in any way, shape, or form. It was annoying. Like I said, only one of the endings I've gotten so far was any good at all. And I wouldn't even put it up there as a necessarily good ending. It was just the best one that I got in this game. I was actually shocked after I beat the game the second time to see how none of the decisions I made mattered one bit. That was the most shocking thing. My jaw physically, literally, IRL dropped for a few minutes. I would just bat like, wow, none of that mattered. I was shocked. And again, if you would like to argue with me down in the comments about that, feel free, because I will tell you exactly what my experience was. And I'll tell you the choices I made and how when I tried to go back and change them, they just didn't matter. I will explain all of it to you if you don't believe me. But all in all, right now, I can't recommend that you buy the game, obviously, because of the bugs and the crashing issues. And even after the hotfix that I've seen, I was still getting crashes. I had multiple crashes after the hotfix. And I didn't say it in this video, I mentioned it in my previous 2 videos. I'm not playing on an older console. I'm playing it on a next-gen console, PS5. The fact that a backwards compatible game, a PS4 version of a game, is running this horrifically on a next-gen console says a lot. I tried installing it on my PS4 Pro. I got through the prologue mission up into the Jackie montage. I had 3 freeze-ups just in that little bit of time. It's only about 15-20 minutes. I had 3 freeze-ups. The game didn't crash, but I had to stop the game and reload because it froze. So, for me, it wasn't running on a PS4 Pro hardly at all. On my PS5, I had a ton of technical issues. I've gotten to the point now where I've been able to mitigate it a bit by about every 90 minutes. I just shut the game off, I close the app, and turn it back on, and that has mitigated the issues somewhat. I still do have some crashes, but because the game has been having some memory leak issues, that is something that if you shut the game off, you can mitigate that to a certain degree. It's not a foolproof plan, but it does work a little bit. Even after the hotfix, I was getting issues where, like, NPCs, their lips weren't moving. So it was getting a lot of frame rate slowdown. It seemed like there was even less cars on the road, less NPCs walking around, which is the obvious thing they would try to fix in order to improve performance. You would remove the amount of assets. But there's one thing that I noticed in the game, and I don't know how many people picked up on this. I hope somebody else picked up on this. But when it comes to the lack of attention to detail, and it is true, there's a lot of lack of attention to detail that went on in this game. Even though this was supposed to be a hugely detailed world, that's what all those reviews before this game. So many lies. But if you go up to one of the kiosks that you use to sell off your items, I don't know if you noticed this, but they all say the word delivery, which actually isn't a word. They were trying to spell the word delivery, but instead they misspelled it. It says delivery. And this is on every single kiosk you go to. It's not a typo per se, because it's not text on the screen, it's not in a conversation, it's not in the subtitles. This is part of an asset that somebody put together that is littered everywhere throughout the game, and the only word you can see on the screen is spelled wrong. And they make you use these kiosks as part of several of the side gigs to drop missions off or to pick up your reward and whatnot. So you see it quite often. Just take a look at it the next time you play through the game. If you're playing an English version of the game, the screen says delivery. And I don't know if they'll fix it. I don't know if they care to fix it. It's a minor thing, but just stuff like that. It's everywhere. Where you can see that they rushed through stuff. That you can see that they didn't have time. You can see that the scope of this game was always way too big and they didn't pull it off. The fact that only one area of the game actually is fleshed out with activities and missions to do, and most of the rest of the areas of the game, they don't have you do anything. Like, it's pretty ridiculous. Watson is overloaded. I guess their plan was to slowly drip feed us content throughout the other areas as the years went on with their robust DLC. And who knows how that's going to work out now. Because if you go and read the transcript of their investor call, the investors are already hounding them, asking them when the multiplayer is coming. Yes, that's right. They don't even have the single-player offline version running yet, and the investors are already asking them about multiplayer. You can go and read the transcript and find the question yourself. So, who knows how much time they're going to put into actually fixing the game. I imagine they have to try to get it up and running properly first, and then slowly try to add features in, and slowly try to add more content in, and maybe over time they can add in entire quest lines that actually might affect the story. I don't know. Bethesda was able to do that to a greater or lesser degree with the Far Harbor DLC. The Far Harbor DLC, if you ever played through it, is a much better piece of content than the rest of that game. But if you compare this game to any other RPG that is known for its great and intricate writing and the storylines that actually matter and choices that actually matter, such as New Vegas, Divinity Original Sin, Wasteland 3, last year Outer Worlds did it pretty well. It is a pretty short game, but it did it pretty well. These are all games that your choices actually do matter. And the people you talk to, and the way you talk to them, and the way you treat them, and the factions you decide to side with, and the ones you decide to make enemies of, they matter. And stuff in the world will react to you. And in Cyberpunk, that's just not the case. This is an action game. It has light RPG elements. It has a bad loot system. It has bad mechanics. The world is a hollow shell. It's really flashy. It looks great at first. But the more you play it, the more the facade rips away. The more you can see that it's just not that great of a game. It's really not. If you want to go through it and play it and have a good time on a single playthrough, you could probably do that. It's okay. It's a pretty good game. It's not bad. I know I just trashed it for 30, 40 minutes now. But it's not completely irredeemable. You can have fun playing it. But it's not the game it was supposed to be. At all. It's not the game that the fanboys are still trying to pretend it is. Like, oh, if you guys just look past the bugs, it's actually a masterpiece under there. No, this is not a masterpiece. It's really not. And the people who gave this game a 10 out of 10 review and hyped it up so much, they should be embarrassed, quite frankly. And I'm going to be talking about that probably in another video upcoming. I want to highlight some of the quotes that we saw beforehand so we can discuss exactly how in the bag the media was for this game. But anyway, that's it for me, Coach Toolshed. Let me know what you guys think about the review down in the comments below. Please subscribe if you want to stay in tune with the channel head forward. And as always, keep it turned to 11.